accept inputs or provide outputs as part of their usage, it's common to see these kinds of components being used in other host components that provide the inputs to them and also listen to the outputs coming from them. In this video, we're going to look at how we can simulate the behavior of a host component, giving us a way to test the input and output interactions of the component under test. To start off here, we have the component under test food item component. When it's used in a template, it can be passed an input property food item, and the value that's passed in here is actually used to populate its template. Over in the template, you can see we're going to depend on the food item's name property and also its description property in our first two paragraphs. Our third element here in our template is a button that we're calling the more button, and you can see its click event is going to be bound to a controller function here on food clicked, passing in that click event. Back over in the controller, you can see that when this on food clicked method is run, it's actually going to use the food selected property, which you can see is set up as an output for this component to emit a new output event, passing out to any listening parties the food that was clicked. So that's our setup, and we want to see how can we test this component's expected input and output interaction without necessarily having to rely on any of the host components that our actual in production app may be using. Over in our test spec file here, you can see we're going to need to import our food item component and also the food item model, which gives us things like the name and description property that we saw being used in the template, and then we're going to create a test suite here. Within that test suite, in an asynchronous before each block here, you can see we're going to set up our test bed using the configure testing module function and also making sure to compile our components so that the external templates are ready for use. In our synchronous before each, we basically continue to create our component fixture based on the food item component, and then we create an instance of our component from that fixture. Below that, you can see us here creating a reference to the debug element that wraps our name paragraph, and we're selecting it via the CSS class food name that I'll quickly show you is set on our first paragraph here. So we're going to get that element set up in a name element property before moving on to the first step we're going to take here to simulate providing an input to our component under test. You can see we're creating an object here, fake food, and we're setting it up as a new food item because we know that our component is going to expect to see a food item as an input. On our next line, line 33, you can see we're actually going to take our component instance, our food item component here, and set its food item input property to our fake food.